Good morning, if it's still morning. Thank you to everyone who has worked to create this important opportunity for all of us to get together, to collaborate and share ideas that will move our common cause forward. I feel so fortunate to be learning from such accomplished speakers and my motivated peers. As a college student, particularly on a small campus, I know that I am susceptible to living in the bubble. I know that my next meal will be with familiar, loving faces, and that many of my needs are taken care of on campus. As a student, this lifestyle is appropriate for learning. However, it can detach us from common realities and create a false sense of security. As college students, it can be easy to think that HIV will never happen to me. HIV/AIDS happens only in other countries, or that's not my problem. This apathy can lead to stigma. Is this on still? Okay. Stigma that can prevent people from seeking physical and mental health treatment, developing a support network, and living the high quality of life that we hope for all people. Stigma prevents life-saving education. We must make our work as youth activists personal and humanized in order to reach our peers. Stories make issues that feel distant become emotionally powerful and concrete. They can be the foundation for action. Stories can be our most effective tool to end stigma. My own story began 2 summers ago on my first day of an internship at a local AIDS service organization. I felt a kind of anxiety that probably wouldn't fit under the first typical day of nervousness. Routine, automatic actions suddenly required deliberation. I sorted through what I could remember of middle school health class while making simple decisions such as, should I use this restroom? Or should I have used that fork or that glass? And most painfully, will I get sick from shaking that person's hand? These were the effects of stigma that I had unknowingly absorbed. Through my coworkers and my training, the myths that I grew up with hearing about HIV, particularly about who has it and how it's transmitted, began to fade. I learned I learned the facts of HIV transmission and its effects on the body. I worked with and met with people who were both HIV positive and HIV negative and learned many of their stories. I learned about how a positive HIV diagnosis influences daily life and relationships. HIV/AIDS started to feel less foreign. Hearing these stories, I started to have a personal stake in the issue. An individual cannot realize his or her own personal stigma unless confronted by it. Our activism is incomplete if we shy away from the struggle against our own fear. We must create similar opportunities for our peers to confront these issues as well. We must invite others, especially those who are HIV positive, to tell their stories. For World AIDS Day, our chapter invited a man I knew from my internship to speak about living with HIV. He spoke sincerely about his struggles, but he also spoke about how his partner had supported him throughout the illness. Many students told me how this changed their perception of what it meant to live with HIV. They were touched by the strength of his relationship, destroying the myth that being HIV positive meant being alone. These stories, as well as the larger history of HIV/AIDS, have been largely left out of our education, even in college. It is our responsibility to educate ourselves and also our campuses about the significant events and experiences in the HIV community. Our chapter has found that art is an effective tool for this. Oli's Face AIDS has had 2 screenings of the critically acclaimed documentary We Were Here about the beginning of the epidemic in San Francisco. The personal stories in the film of caring for and losing friends, the strength and perseverance of those who were ill, the courage of the nurses, and the oppression that they all faced are deeply moving. One student told me, "I never knew about any of that. How did I not know?" In an event called AIDS in the Arts, students performed scenes from plays with characters ranging from white gay male activists in the 80s to straight African American and African women in the early 2000s. Additionally, music, poetry about illness, embodiment, and death, interviews with playwrights, and clips from Angels in America provided multiple perspectives about what it means to live with HIV. These strong, sympathetic characters express a narrative that many of us were not raised with, one of hope instead of fear. The diversity of experiences expressed through stories forever destroys the myth that there is a typical AIDS patient. Instead, there are many people who are living with HIV. The sooner this realization is made, the harder it becomes to discriminate and stigmatize. Once we know their stories, we cannot make people statistics or define them based on one reality of their lives. We will not avoid or detach ourselves from people once we understand more about both the biological and personal aspects of living with HIV. We as youth have the energy and the unique historical position of growing up with the needed knowledge, technology, and resources to end this epidemic. We must create opportunities to listen and to storytell. We need the political will and the commitment to end not only the spread of HIV and AIDS, but also the stigma that so many people undeservedly experience. Thank you.
I'm glad we were able to incorporate more student voices into the conference this year, and it's something we'll continue to incorporate. So thank you for sending in your submissions, and I hope in the future you all send more to speak at the conference. It's now my greatest pleasure to introduce Dr. Edward Machtinger. He is the director of the Women's HIV program at UCSF. He is also a professor of medicine there. But more so, I'm so excited to introduce him because he embodies the spirit of what Dr. Alina Wen talked about this earlier in the conference. The whole concept that being a physician is much more than curing people, but it's much more about listening and listening to the stories and being open to who you are treating. I am honored to have him speak about his experience and just to share how he embodies this. He listens with his whole body, and the patients that he treats and that he works with, he really greets them with an open heart, which is something that not everyone will greet these people with every day. So without further ado, thank you, Eddie, for coming to speak with us today.
Hi. So, Kate, where are you? So that was an amazing introduction to what I'm going to talk about, and just a really insightful talk. Storytelling is medicine. Storytelling is healing. It's largely what I research now. It's what my career is focused on. It's what I'm going to do right now, tell my story. Your stories are all relevant. The more you can understand things, people, your life, events as a story, the more I think they'll make sense, the more you can share them. So it's really, really smart. So my name is Eddie Machtinger. I'm associate professor at UCSF. I direct the Women's HIV program. Margot, when she invited me to come today, wanted me to talk to you about taking care of women of color with HIV. But I think more than that, wanted me to help you imagine as high school students and college students how your career can evolve and feel meaningful and interesting and exciting. So there's too many of you to go around and introduce yourself, because that would become kind of crazy time-wise. But I just wonder, like, how many of you are high school kids? How many of you are college kids? How many of you are seniors in college? And this is kind of a vaguer question, or two more. How many of you guys are on a mission and know what you want to do career-wise already? Like, pretty clear. You don't have to. It's not like you shouldn't necessarily need to know that, or can't in a lot of ways. And then, totally different question. Like, how many of you guys have seen the documentary film that came out, How to Survive a Plague? All right. So there's going to be some video in my talk, including some clips from this amazing movie. And as activists yourself, I can't imagine a better primer than that film for what it looks like to be an activist and to truly speak from your heart, and what that looks like, and how you know that you are truly speaking from your heart if you look like these people in that movie. So my main point today in all of this, like I'm going to talk to you about my story being an AIDS doctor and how I came to it and what I do, but my main point today is to encourage each of you to find something to do with your lives and your career that is important, that protects things that you value, and that you can infuse with creativity and beauty. That's what I care about, and that's what I hope you do and get from my talk. So, hold on here while I figure this out. So many of the pictures in this talk, almost every slide has pictures. This helps me ground myself to the stories of my patients and what matters. And this is Cassandra and Diamond. Diamond is her grandson who she adopted because her daughter is in her own addiction. And Cassandra now takes care of Diamond and does a really good job. So in the next 45 minutes or so, this is Mignon, she's my patient. I'm going to talk about how in college I came to the realization that HIV was important. How I came to consider medical school and some tips for those of you who are interested in medical school. Because I know a lot of you are interested in international health. I've done some work in Uganda, and I wanted to share some lessons I learned about how to be an effective public health advocate in an international setting. And then more finally, like how I keyed into the women's AIDS epidemic as being important, under-recognized, and a place where I could make a meaningful difference in the lives of my patients and in the course of the epidemic. And then hopefully there'll be some time for some questions. We can talk. So I got to New York City. I went to NYU for college, and I was 17. I was just coming out as a gay kid. I was interested in music, activism, Central American politics, animal rights, and I was just totally psyched to be living in New York City. And I got there really as the AIDS epidemic was unfolding. This was 1985. And I saw so much in the AIDS epidemic that was so interesting to me. There was, make this bigger so I can see my slides. So there was politics, there's local politics, there was national politics, there was sexuality, there was fame and beauty, there was activism, there was the rest of the world, there was drugs. And to me, this AIDS just encapsulated so much about the world and life and issues that were important to me all in one situation. On my 18th birthday, in October of 1985, the big news was they closed the New York City's bathhouses, and that's the upper left-hand picture of one of the notices on the wall, and it was covering every paper, and it was the beginning, really, of the country's response to AIDS. This, all of these interesting things, all of the politics and activism and art and beauty and, the intellectual stuff and the emotional stuff was also happening in the context of people dying. Just all over the place. Like you walk down the street here in San Francisco too, but in New York City as well, and people were dying. Young people were dying. It was really obvious that there was this international historic plague occurring during our lifetimes, during my lifetime as a kid, during your lifetimes now. And these also became my friends dying. And this is a really iconic photo from Life magazine that kind of showed the world kind of what this looked like. I, at that time, kind of coming of age as a gay kid, joined Gay Men's Health Crisis as a buddy, going and being with isolated people with AIDS who were dying. So, the Shanti Project in San Francisco does the same thing. And I later became a crisis intervention worker with them. I also, during this time, one of the things, the first time I encountered the medical establishment, you know, like, I don't know how many of you guys have had sick relatives or sick friends or been really genuinely sick yourself, but my first encounter with the medical establishment was going with David, who was a friend of mine who had AIDS, who was dying, to Cornell and participating in his death from the kind of just stunned kid friend perspective. And that's how I saw doctors and nurses and a hospital, and it was actually a good experience. I think people have really bad experiences in hospitals. It was hard to be with somebody who was dying, but I think the people in the hospital were really beautiful and good to David. So I was also really moved. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I was doing a lot of things, and I was really moved by activists. I saw these activists, and mostly they were with ACT UP, which was centered in New York at that time. And these guys and women were young and fighting for their lives. Like, no shit. Like, they were out there because they were dying. They themselves were dying. And to look at them and watch them, they were smart and tactical and super duper effective. And it was an incredible thing to see what that looked like. And it became what I aspired to look like when I speak, to care that much about what I'm doing. And I'm going to show a clip right now. I'm going to show 2 clips from the movie How to Survive a Plague. And I've seen these clips before. And I watch them, and every time I see them, I'm inspired by them. And so this is going to be a little tech nightmare for a second. So,
tonight, from Washington, Crossfire, against all odds. On the left, Tom Braden. On the right, Pat Buchanan. In the Crossfire, Peter Staley of the New York AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power.
Peter Staley, you have the AIDS virus, and I am sorry. But don't you think that the Federal Drug Administration has a responsibility not to let people such as you have quacks that could cause even more harm than you already have?
The problem is that the FDA is using the same process to test a nasal spray as it is to test AIDS drugs, and it's a 7 to 10 year process.
You have the FDA giving you a drug. So far, you've got AZT. Why
Which
would...
I can't take because it's far too toxic,
But
and over half the people that have HIV can't take
Okay,
it.
but the FDA says there is nothing else that is worth anything.
Mr. Staley, this is going to astonish you, but I agree with you 100%. I think if someone's got AIDS and someone wants to take a drug, it's their life, and if they give some hope, they ought to be able to take it. What I want to ask you is whether you know of anything that you think might be some kind of miraculous cure that you think they're sitting on at FDA.
There are over 140 drugs out there that the FDA has identified as possibilities and are in some stage of being looked at right now.
Why are they holding
Among
back?
that 140, there's got to be one or a combination thereof that can slow down this virus or halt it in its tracks.
You're just simply carrying the virus, is that correct?
I have a few very minor symptoms, and my immune system is virtually shot.
What would you like to take?
I would like to be able to take dextran sulfate legally.
How would that hurt
taking
you?
it on the underground right now.
Well, why not, Mr. Braden?
Because I don't know anything about dextran sulfate.
Well, I'll tell you
neither do
this,
but
it's an over-the-counter drug in Japan and has been for 20 years.
But if
Over-the-counter in
but
Japan?
if the
Yes.
but if the FDA says
Mr.
I'm only
Staley.
asking that they be released after there's a minimal amount of efficacy,
Well,
not
Final
a
question, Tom, let me
100%
get something
test.
here. You've got the pink triangle on your shirt, silence of
correct.
address. I gather that means you're homosexual.
Yes.
Looking in the camera, what would you tell some kid, say you had a younger brother, 21 years old, who also might have homosexual tendencies? What would you tell him if you wanted him to live a long life?
Use a condom, and also to use a lubricant, by the way, that has
aren't you
the
mean,
medicine
this is
that
Russian
can,
roulette.
It is not Russian roulette. It is Russian roulette to not give people this information when human nature dictates that they're going to go out there and they're going to
You mean
have sex
celibacy
anyway.
is impossible?
It's just not going to work. People aren't going to do it, and lots of people are going to die. Now, would you rather have a lot of people cheating on their celibacy with thousands of people dying, or would you rather save those lives and let them have sex?
I think that, well, thank you very much, Peter Staley. Thanks for being in the studio. Mr. Braden and I will be back in a minute.
You know, like, what do you do with him? Like, this guy's a beautiful, amazing creature. I love him. I mean, he's alive. He survived. He's one of the few people in this film that survived. ACT UP figured out that they were a protest movement that needed the government. You know, they can't develop drugs. You know, they can't come together and develop drugs. They needed the entire power of the government to be behind responding to this plague. And the entire power of the government was actually not behind responding to this plague. You know, the president didn't even mention HIV until 1987, you know, when hundreds of thousands of people had been infected. So they realized that they needed to encourage the government to act, and acted extremely strategically and effectively. So one more video clip from that film. So the other moving, really tremendously moving experience I had was going, I had a friend who died, and I went with his wife to bring his little quilt piece that we made to the AIDS Memorial Quilt in Washington, D.C. And you know, this is another piece of performance art. As activism, as beauty, as healing, you know, that was this AIDS Memorial Quilt. It's just incredible. I mean, look at this thing. And this is us, Maureen and I, with Don's quilt piece. And I'm going to just show one more clip from the film. This is a rather long clip. It's pretty intense. Basically, there was the memorial quilt, and then there was an ACT UP demonstration where ACT UP demonstrators took the ashes of their partners who died and wanted to bury them on the lawn of the White House. And there was basically a war that was very intense to witness between the people trying to do that and the police blocking the gates to the White House on horses. And I was not leading this protest. I was just part of this protest, and it just was quite a formative, dramatic thing to see and very inspiring to me. So this is a 6-minute clip. I hope that you like it, and it's worth the time.
One of the things we wanted was a drug.
Steve H. My friends, David Evans, Nicholas Kaiser, George Marshall, and my beloved brother, Dennis J.
These are two separate ways of advocating coming together.
Philip Gregory Ellison, Terry Ronan,
Michael Bennett,
Donald Red,
Ron Field, Tina Chow, Perry Ellis, Freddie Mercury, Peter Allen, to the thousands of other people who were made to suffer in silence.
Join ACT UP for a political funeral. Meet at the steps of the Capitol at 1 p.m. Give a wake-up call to George Bush and Bill Clinton and Perot.
I think the quilt itself does good stuff and is moving. Still, it's like making something beautiful out of the epidemic. And I felt like doing something like this is a way of showing there's nothing beautiful about it. You know, this is what I'm left with. I've got a box full of ashes and bone chips. You know, there's no beauty in that. And I felt like a statement like this is like saying this is what George Bush has done. You know, this is what him and Ronald Reagan before him have done. These are our loved ones, and this is what they've been reduced to, and we're bringing them to the person who's responsible for their death.
So, to me, this is what activism looks like, whether whether it's about AIDS, environmentalism, animals, social justice. This is what it takes. I mean, to pull that off, to get the permit to get the quilt on the lawn was this huge feat. Like, I talked to the people who got that permit, and it's just like, and then let alone pulling the ACT UP demo off and infusing the quilt with it and not coming to battles between the organizations. It's just, it's a beautiful thing. All right. So I decided to go to medical school in my 4th year of NYU. At that point in time, I hadn't taken a single science class. I hadn't taken a single math class. I was totally this liberal arts, negligent, music-loving, activist gay kid, and decided to go to medical school. And I think, what to say, like, I decided to go to medical school because AIDS was intense. I knew I wanted to be involved with it, and medicine seemed like it would provide kind of a structure and a role for me to engage people meaningfully and engage the epidemic meaningfully. And I have a couple reflections for those of you who are considering going to medical school. Who here is kind of on a health or medical school or nursing school route? So my couple reflections about this are the following. One, you don't have to like science and biology and chemistry and be good at it to be a great doctor. You have to do well in your pre-meds to get into medical school. There's a distinction between those two things. And the other piece that I can say is I was very fortunate because I did my pre-meds when I was 21 years old in a 1.5 year long period of time at the end of my college. I did them slowly, and I was much more mature, and I was able to sit still. And so my advice to you, if you're thinking about doing it or considering doing it, is just go slow. Do it at the speed that you are comfortable doing it and get good grades. And if you're not ready to do that, don't do it yet. Because if you get C's and B's, you're not going to get into medical school, and you're not going to have fun. So go do your pre-meds and consider going to medical school when you feel like it's your right time to do it. That's my advice about going to medical school. So I then went to medical school at Harvard. I came out to UCSF and did my residency in internal medicine. And I'm going to put this next little piece in here because I know a lot of you guys are already interested and maybe even already active in international